All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another video. And I'm joined again by my good friend Dharnish here. It's been a while since we've done one of these tactical videos, obviously, with United not playing games over the summer and everything. Preseason is not the best measure of these kind of things. And once you get into the year, it's all a bit different. But I thought after a couple games, it'd be a good time to get back into this. And one of the things we want to do that I want to mention right here at the start is in as we go through the season on the platform that I've been doing these watch alongs, they're going to be having a tactics board that is on the screen that you can move around and draw and do all sorts of things with. That's really cool. And I think that we'll want to do like a weekly roundup, maybe a shorter video every week. Once this is out, utilizing that to show kind of the way that we played, the concerns, the areas, the problems, and kind of address things and just do a bit of a run through. And I think that'll be really fun in the future. But for now, welcome back, Dharnish. How are you?
It's a pleasure to be back. I am chomping at the bit, to be honest. I'm absolutely buzzing that the season's back because this is a lot of people say that I don't like the season until it gets to like halfway and stuff, and that's fine. But these first few weeks are where we're really trying to find out what teams are trying to do with and without the
Yes.
ball. And then later we see, okay, managers go, well, God, that didn't work, or okay, that worked, and then we'll get it along with it. But it's just I'm very good, and honestly, I'm quite enjoying Man United playing football. I know and we'll talk about it, but there is concerns, but there's positives and there's negatives. But there has definitely been a change in the
Yeah.
tactics. The headline news is there's definitely change in the tactics now. There's good parts and
Yes.
there's bad parts about them both. We've
Yep.
only had 180 minutes of football, but we're going to discuss it in detail.
For sure. So yeah. So I guess starting with it in kind of general, and then we can talk about maybe the two specific games a bit more. What would you say is the biggest change between this year so far in a couple games and the last one? The biggest difference tactically. Obviously, there's all the different facets of the game, from the buildup to the pressing to the attacking positions to all sorts of aspects. But what would you say the biggest change is overall? And I think for the positive, because there are positive changes. What would you say is the
Absolutely.
biggest one so far?
I mean, we'll have to put it into context and we'll have to asterisk everything. But the biggest change is in possession. In possession, the build-up is. I literally just got done fresh from seeing a Brighton rewatch, and I was like, okay. I mean, look, it's not perfect. It's not there right
Yep.
now, but I was like, this is good build-up. There's good
Yep.
build-up going on here. There was at least 5 or 6 occasions in the Brighton game where we got the ball smoothly from defense into midfield into attack under pressure as well. Under pressure as well.
Yep.
I'm not saying we've got the sexiest build-up in the world now. I'm just saying it's a lot better than what we saw last season. The
For sure.
reasons for the reasons for this, I think, is most of the tactics that Ten Hag did last season was a reaction to the um, catalog of injuries that he had. Each facet, I kept saying it on videos here. Each facet, it was a reaction to the injuries, and each reaction was bad.
Right. Yeah.
None of the tactics that Ten Hag adapted for the injuries was spectacular. None of it. Whether you want to
Yep.
talk about the hoofball before winter, whether you want to talk about chaos ball after January, where it made more players exhausted, and he kept bringing players back who were just fresh from the injury table, didn't allow them
Yep.
to have time coming back in. The team was out of sync. All of it. And he kept saying this in press conferences, and then we had that little period where we were a little bit better, where we got everybody back from injuries. And he said, "Look, I
Yep.
told you." Um, so the build-up is miles better. It's very similar to what we saw in the FA Cup final, like very similar. It's very similar to what we saw in the FA Cup final, and very similar to what we saw in the last sort of 3 games in the Premier League. Um,
Yep.
it's more patient. It's giving players a license, or the license, but also the sort of pressure to be like, okay, you're gonna have to go and be a little bit risky with the ball, and the onus is on
Sure.
you. Martinez helps with that. Mazraoui helps a massive amount with that. Diego Dalot helps insanely with that too. Um, but the buildup is the biggest thing that I've seen that is a big change. There was reports after Fulham or some people saying it's not that effective yet in creating space. It isn't, but it's still there. The onus is there to be a more patient team, a more calmer team with working the ball, dragging players towards them, and then waiting for the ball. So, and this will come up in the thread that I'm doing against Brighton. There was a few times Mazraoui would get it, and Brighton's attack would fully press Welbeck, Matoma, Jakob Minte, and I think who's the other one? Help me out here. Welbeck, Minte, Matoma, and Sir Milner. Milner from CM.
Yeah.
It all push up. And what they were doing, Casemiro and Mino had the ball, or like we're in the middle of the pitch, and they were purposefully clogging up where Mino and Casemiro is, obviously because Mino is fantastic out of pressure, under pressure. So the ball would go to either left to Dallo or right to Mazraoui. And as everybody would press, they would knock it down the line to Fernandes or Mount or Rashford. They would hold the ball up, tuck it inside, or they would go long and switch it. Now, I looked at that a few times and I said, I like that. I genuinely like that a lot. That's a really good build-up. Especially the first 30 minutes is some of the best build-up I've seen us do under Ten Hag. If that didn't happen, and this is where it gets really interesting to me, and this is the stuff I think about before bed, and I'm going to think about this before bed tonight. Onana is here, and Onana long ball is here. Last year all we got was Onana hoofing it to absolutely nobody. This against Brighton, what we saw is when the players were pressed, Mino, Casemiro, Martinez, Maguire, Mazraoui, when they were marked by Brighton players, Onana would chip it over them, so over like 4 or 5 Brighton players and get it to Dallo, or he would chip it over and go long to Amad Diallo and Rashford. Now again, when they got it, maybe Diallo and Rashford, they didn't have the notice to be like, okay, we've actually got time here and it's just me. I'm going to chest it down. They would, like, I think there was one occasion Rashford sort of headed it along and there was nobody there. And he sort of put his arms up and got frustrated. But that's basically another facet of the build-up developing, whereas Ten Hag has either instructed Onana, look, we need to use your ball-playing abilities now. So those are the two aspects that I see that are positives for sure. The other big change has been in the pressing, but I think we're going to discuss that now.
Yes, and that was the thing that I wanted to mention because I definitely noticed that a lot. Against Fulham, I thought it was probably a bit better than against Brighton. But there were other reasons I want to ask you about for that, just on some things I noticed. But the pressing structure was definitely better. One of the things that I was looking for, and I feel like the funny thing with United is that, and maybe this is true of modern football, is you can tell almost everything by the fullbacks and where they are. I was looking against Fulham for when they pressed, were the fullbacks coming with, right? Because essentially that was your marker for whether that line was going to push up and follow the press or not, right? Do the fullbacks come with? Because when the wingers go, they're expecting to get bypassed, right? They're expecting someone to get around them and them to make numbers to beat the wingers who are pressing. But if the fullback is there and the fullback can jump in and win the ball, then you win it high. Then you don't get this big gap where they run past the winger and they're running all the way down. And then you have, Rashford or Ahmad or Garnacho spending the entire game running back towards their own goal line, trying to defend, and you can keep them forward. Against Fulham, we won it really high, I felt. And it also allowed us to win it with our wingers up the pitch still, so that they didn't have to do these huge transitions, right, from deep to forward, and we were able to attack really fast. And we saw that. Like, it's funny because it wasn't always on the wings, of course, but we saw the high wins from Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo result in 2 or 3 huge chances for Bruno Fernandes, which he unfortunately didn't score in that first game, but like instant, like very Liverpool-like, which was winning it high, pressing it high. You're not having to go long. You're already on goal. You win the ball right near their goal. You make one pass and you're in, And I thought that was really impressive. I thought that was a very positive aspect. Against Brighton, I think the press was still better. The gaps between everybody weren't big. United did drop off when they needed to drop off instead of continuing to press when the line was very deep and leaving these huge midfield spaces. So I thought that was a big improvement. What do you see there? And let me ask you one more question on that for your answer. Is it only because Mason Mount and Bruno were starting instead of a striker? Yeah. And do you think that with Mason Mount potentially not playing for the next game and instead it being someone like Joshua Zirkzee, will that press fail now? Will it fall off? Is it just a personnel problem? So go ahead and give me that answer.
Two very good questions. You can see how animated I am because I'm
Yes.
trying my best not to speak, but I was giving you both the thumbs up. Just to clarify before we jump into this, is Mount fit for the next game or is he injured?
I don't think he is. He's not been
You
in
don't think he's
training
injured?
this
No.
week. No, I don't think he's fit.
Oh,
He's not been
ah,
training this week. So that would lead me to believe, he's not been pictured in any of the training. And I mean, Jadon Sancho, who's on the cusp of leaving, is in training,
hmm.
but Mason Mount is not. That's
What are we,
concerning.
Wednesday? Game is Sunday?
I'd be concerned. I'm concerned because we're not seeing him.
I hear you. I hear
Yeah.
you. And I
And
would be
so
concerned too
I don't want
because
to give a
that's
definitive
gutting.
answer on that. Yeah. But let's
That's
assume
gutting.
that Mason Mount isn't playing in the next game for this answer. But
The pressing is definitely.
let's also assume that for the long term, we're not gonna play Bruno and Mount as our forwards, that we're going to play a striker in there.
I mean, you've asked some very good questions. The last two, we'll start with them. This
Yeah.
pressing structure has good points up that I will come to, and you need to, like everything with football, you need to contextualize it. But there are definitely bad points with this that I've definitely seen against Brighton and against Fulham. Mason Mount is absolutely crucial to this pressing structure out of possession. He's absolutely crucial against Fulham as well. He was genuinely covering up for some gaps in the structure. Um, he's a very smart presser. Whether he knows, like sometimes, obviously Bruno goes wayward and he goes to press the centre backs. Mount's smart enough to pull back and press and stick on one of the central midfielders, which is what creates the upside from this pressing structure.
Yeah.
So if he's out for Liverpool, I don't think Ten Hag will change it, but it's definitely going to be detrimental, the pressing structure. It's definitely going to be, there's going to be more gaps. Now, against Fulham and against Brighton, there were upsides and there were downsides. The upsides that we saw against Fulham, like you said, the fullbacks were pushing up and they were coming together when needed as well. But also another thing that you need to look out for is when two central midfielders come and drop deep for the opposition. So say, I think against Fulham it was Pereira and Emil Smith Rowe, or Pereira and Lukic, and Brighton it was Hinchelwood and Milner. How I knew that we were going to come in with the pressing is Casemiro and Mino pushing up. And as this happens, Bruno or Mount is pressing one of the centre backs. And one of the deepest midfielders is being tracked by Mount. So the other midfielder is being tracked by Casemiro or Mino. The upsides to this are teams are rushed in possession. You pin them back. They can't build out very well. So they'll just end up going long. Like we saw Calvin Bassey, there was a couple of times it was like, well, I've got no options here. I'm just going to go long. There were other times as well where Casemiro pushed up right against Fulham's defense, and the keeper made a mistake and gave it out to us. Against Brighton as well, it was the same. They pressed Lewis Dunk, and Lewis Dunk has ended up trying to pass it back to Jason Steele, but we got a corner from him. Now, is this pressing structure perfect? Absolutely not. Is it effective on some occasions? Absolutely.
Right.
But there's drawbacks to it because number one, the press isn't perfect, and Mount has gone off in both games. And whenever he's gone off in both games, the pressing structure looks much worse, much worse. There's gaps everywhere when Mount goes off. There's draw sides to every pressing structure because it's risky. It's
risk and
risky to
reward,
press
right? Yeah.
inside. I've literally just made a tweet now, and this happened against Fulham and it happened against Brighton. So when Mount went off, obviously maybe Xerxes and Rashford especially he's not a very intelligent presser. There was times against the Brighton game where it was his side that kept breaking the press. I don't know if you saw this, but they kept going left development, and Rashford would have to run out to him because he wasn't so close in the first place. They would knock it into the half space to Milner, and hey presto, Brighton were in United's half with ease. There's gaps in the pressing structure whereby if Mount goes off, and sometimes he covers up with the press because he's so aggressive and tenacious, and he can end up like, or even against Fulham where he knew Fulham were in, he just took a foul. There was twice where he just took a foul, and one time he got a yellow card from it. There's gaps open up when United players go up to press, say it was Brighton or Fulham, and then I think Jason Steele smacked a pass into Welbeck and João Pedro. Now Fulham did this too, and you're gonna see teams do this more against Man United if they have their wits about them. Is they're gonna
Right.
keep dropping forwards in, because if forwards drop in closer to the keeper, it means that the defenders and midfielders are going to get dragged in. Now it happened against Fulham and against Brighton, where we saw Martinez, as much as I love him, be so aggressive on Welbeck and Pedro because they've been told to do that. They got pressed in all the way to the halfway line. They didn't get a tackle in, and there was space in behind. Against Fulham, Maguire was amazing. I think he made like a game-saving tackle through it.
Yes, but
And
that's always
against
stepping up
Brighton,
into the midfield and on the
yes,
long ball
yes, of
headers.
course.
Yep.
And against Brighton, Milner got a chance and Dalot had to clear it off the line. Now, again, this is the risk that you run with this structure. This is the risk that you run where you're telling your defenders you need to go aggressive, you need to press front forward. So, were Fulham bad? Maybe. But are you like cajoling them? Are you like giving the onus on them, making them force mistakes because you're pressing high? It's a bit of
Correct. Yes.
both. It's a bit of both. And how many times are you going to play a Fulham this season? At least 11. You're going to play
But
Palace. You're going to play
it'd be
Bournemouth.
nice
You're
to
going to play
pick up those
Brentford.
points, right? Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, and that's what they did well in this first season. You're going to play Leicester. You're going to play Forest. So if you press those players who maybe aren't that good with the ball at their feet, for instance, Calvin Bassey, you're going to force them into mistakes. And when your enemies make mistakes, you don't stop them. Instead, you benefit from what they're doing. Against Brighton, again, there was gaps. Absolutely. In the second half, there was gaps. But you run the risk of this if you want to keep pursuing with it. And I think they're going to keep pursuing with it. The worry for me is with Mount out, this structure is a lot more worse. And he fixes a lot of there's a lot of tape that he puts on. How do you call it? Papering over the cracks.
Paper over the cracks,
over the structure.
He's a problem solver with his energy, right? And in almost a way, which we spoke about before, why we missed Fred that we've talked about, because he did the same with his energy,
my boy
right?
Fred, man. Getting a hat trick in Turkey, lying on a beach.
Because it was the same. His energy, his ground coverage would often cover up holes that were there, even with other qualities lacking. He did that, and Mount has been doing that the first couple of games.
And what do United need right now, or what could United do with right now? A squad player who is going to come on any minute that you want, be aggressive, lead the press, cover 50 yards, and it would be Fred. It would be Fred right now. So I'm just looking forward to the next 15 games to see, number one, do we keep pressing? Number two, is the press going to keep getting better, or are we going to get exploited? That's what we're dealing with right now. And in
now, let me ask you a question.
The fact that the build-up structure is better. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question just on the pressing with the new signing of Manuel Ugarte. Now, Ugarte is a much more, at this stage, out of possession, a much more energetic player than Casemiro. He has a lot more legs. He can cover more ground. He can be more involved. And I think his greatest strength out of possession is he gets high and helps to win the ball high. He does, and he takes risks. There's no doubt about this, which seems to align with how we want to play. This signing of Ugarte, I can very much insist strongly from an information standpoint, is these out of possession principles that he brings. Do they have risks? For sure, but do they see it as something that is worth taking and that aligns with the way they want to play moving forward? Absolutely. So when you say they're probably going to keep doing this risk versus reward pressing, I'm sure that they are, and I'm sure that Ugarte is being brought in because he can do it better than Casemiro from an out of possession perspective in winning the ball high, pressing high, challenging the players. So it's going to require United to be very aggressive, and there's going to be cracks, and there's going to be mistakes, and they're going to concede big chances. But I go back to this, and I hate how many times I have to make the comparison between United and early Liverpool under Klopp. But it feels more like that's the direction United are going than you take like an Arsenal or a City in terms of how they play football. I could be wrong in that, but regardless, I do remember with Liverpool when they got it right, their press was really, really good, and they won the ball a lot, and they were really scary to play against, and they were really frustrating to play against because they would really suffocate you with their
Yeah.
aggression off the ball. They'd give up huge chances before Van Dijk came in and earlier on, before Allison and before they really got it right. They gave up huge chances every game on the break, right? Players getting through that. When you did get through the press, you'd be in on goal. But it was very frustrating to play against. And the better they got at it, the more they suffocated their opponents. And so that's the risk versus reward aspect to it. I'm not saying City and Arsenal aren't good pressers of the ball either, because they are, especially in their counter pressing. But this does seem like the way that United want to go in terms of maintaining this very high pressure,
High pressing intensity.
intensity. So
I would say that if we're doing the comparison with Liverpool, their three forwards were a lot better without the ball and they're a lot more
correct. Yes.
intelligent than we were. And
Yes.
that was more of an intense press. As in, that was more of an intense press of like, my God, this is just ridiculous. We can't even compete. And their energy levels were very high. And we have two forwards, one forward that is sort of learning and is just getting into the games. I'm glad that he's getting games, by the way. I'm really happy that he scored Ahmad. And another forward who just isn't that good out of possession. So there's
one problem I do want to say on that for sure is that I think that, as you said, our forwards are not all intelligent pressers. I looked at the stats, and I think in terms of like recoveries and winning the ball high and effective pressures, Rashford is like down here. And Garnacho is only a little bit above him, even though he's much more energetic.
He's better out of possession. Garnacho is very smart out of possession. So
it's better.
I think he's grown in that sense,
And then I think Ahmad is intelligent with his pressing, but maybe doesn't have the speed or the physicality yet to do it. But I think that the one thing I will say about Joshua Zirkzee that hopefully helps is statistically, he was one of the best pressers in Italy for forwards among strikers, I believe. And so hopefully he can bring some of that intelligence to the front line. That would be a positive, I think.
But the problem with pressing structures, though, is like, even if you have one player who's smart pressing, it needs to be as a unit, right? You need to follow the manager's instructions as a unit. And then when you get subbed out, because there's 7 attackers now, there's 7 attackers and they're all going to get game time. The ones that come on to replace the attacker, he's going to have to be smart. He's going to have to be intelligent to guess where he's going. It's interesting that we talk about Ugarte being very similar to Casemiro, being more energetic than Casemiro, because I got to be honest, I'm liking Casemiro these first 2 games.
He's definitely surprised. He was better for sure.
I may have bought a few stocks. The price has slightly gone up at 5-10%. I can't lie, that this is a better Casemiro. Okay, it's not Casemiro of 22, 23, but this is definitely sharper. It's better in the tackle. He makes more tackles. His reading of the game is better. Still some problems there to iron out, but this is a better Casemiro. But it's interesting that you also mentioned Ugarte being very aligned, because if he is, he's a very, very aggressive presser and makes a ton of tackles. In Copa America, I watched him a lot because it was Uruguay. It was the godfather of pressing was Marcelo Bielsa, and he led the press as well. Made a lot of fouls, made a ton of fouls. I think Uruguay made 30-odd fouls in one game.
They were very aggressive.
I mean, that's like that. It was 30 fouls. I think Ugarte made 5 of them. So in that sense, he'll definitely help. And also, like, the thing about social media is they normally when one person says one thing, the others kind of say the same. So I'm gonna let, like, and I know a ton of people who are very smart on social media. I know a ton of people who are very good at this as well. But like, I'm gonna do my proper research. I'll do some film, I'll watch it, and then I'll see what this guy has to offer. But you're absolutely correct.
I am so surprised how negative it's been on Ugarte. I really am, because
I think it's mainly because I don't like the fee. I gotta say,
Mhm.
I don't like the fee of a deal of a player where PSG
When
make
the
their money
club's trying to
back.
get rid of him, yeah, yeah, and they're making their money back. I understand that.
Specifically,
Mhm.
like especially when PSG are the guys who run around and go, "Oh, we got all the cash in the world." So I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
like it when they
yeah.
make their money back. They don't need to make their
Yes,
money back. Like, who
yeah.
cares? Like they
I
don't.
understand the principle of that matter. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah, and also I think it's because they think that there was possibly another midfielder out there who we could have got with a different fee. But since day one in this market, we haven't heard anything in terms of a CDM
Well,
of
this is what I
another
want to
target
bring
at
up.
all ever.
Yes, this is what I want to bring up to you on this point and discuss. You know, one is that obviously, you know, there's the fee and the principle of the thing, and I think that to some degree, what people will separate it out and say, if United as a club want a player, you kind of do have to forget the other things. Like if they think someone's the right player, the circumstances, where they're at, the other club, what they paid for them before, United don't particularly care, right? Because
No,
you know you'd rather get the player than have PSG suffer. Even though you'd rather both, you'd rather just get the player, right? It doesn't really matter to you if he's the right guy and you think he's the right guy, right? Um, but you know the thing that I think comes up right is that there's a way I believe a lot of people want United to play.
mm,
That's not the way United want to play. You know what I mean? And so when I've looked at a lot of the discussion around this defensive midfielder, this six, Ugarte has been the main name, and people will talk about Amadou Onana and say, well, why didn't we get Amadou Onana for about the same money, more versatile player? But if you know, Fofana was a big one that people were excited about, not very expensive
yeah,
even. But when you look at them, they're totally different players, aren't they?
yeah,
You know, they're
absolutely.
quite different. And it feels like people really wanted. I go on about this a little bit, and you may feel this way too. A lot of people wanted United to be. I feel that a lot of people wanted almost like, I don't know what you would call it, but an attacking eight who tackles well as your six. And that's their view
Mm,
of an ideal six,
yeah,
is somebody
yeah,
who's going to
yeah, yeah.
pass the ball through the lines,
Attacking aim
who's
and
going to
tackles
break the
well.
ball through the
Yeah,
lines,
yeah,
who's going to
that's
create, who's
fair.
going to be like, because that's Fofana. Fofana's not a six. He's an attacking eight who can play deeper, and he's big and he's physical, right? Onana really didn't play as your shield, you know, as your backline shield at Everton. It's not really how he. I'm not saying he can't. I like Onana, but that's not the role he was playing for Everton. And I don't know that that's the role
No,
he's going to play at Aston Villa. They have players to do the shielding and
but
all
but
of that.
also but also we're talking about an Amadou Onana who played for Everton. Like
Yes.
it's not if you play
He's
for
not
Everton,
so
the point
proven
of
as,
what you're trying to
yeah.
do.
Yep.
I mean, no, don't get me wrong. I would have loved Amadou
Yep.
Onana. I would have absolutely loved
Yep.
Amadou Onana. But again, there's context around everything. And
Correct. Yes.
around the Onana deal, correct me if I'm wrong, Villa were
Yep.
facing PSR. Everton still are battling PSR. They said, look,
Yep.
you can have Onana and we'll take, I think, I can't pronounce his name. I'm really sorry. Sam something. Sam, I can't
Yeah.
pronounce his name. Begins with
I
I.
know the name. I'm not going to do better with
It's a
pronouncing
very
it, so it's
complicated name.
okay.
It begins with I,
Yeah.
and they gave him 9 million, and they took him off of their books as well. So there was little things like that as well in the deal.
Correct.
But you are, I mean, I think people expected more of. I think they just wanted more from a midfield signing. They wanted a
Correct.
midfield destroyer, but somebody who was better with the ball at his feet as well. Could
Hmm.
you try something where I think it was Carl Anka tweeted today? Could you try something where Ugarte is the six and Cass is already doing that thing where he goes forward? Maybe. Cass all of a sudden is having 3 shots a game in now anyway. So um,
Yep. But
the
I
point
also, one
is,
of the things I did want to point out on that is Kobe Mainoo's, the number of tackles he's had to make the first two games, the amount of
yeah,
physical work he's had to do is too
yes,
much.
yeah,
I think it's too
yeah,
much for him. I think it's detrimental in the long run for him to have. I mean, he did 20 duels against Fulham. I mean, probably the
yeah.
most of any player in for our team in the last like 10 years. The
Why
number
is
of
that
duels
happening?
he.
Casemiro's next to him. Why is that happening?
Right. Well, and I think it's because it's like you have this Casemiro's aggression is so aggressive in there,
Yeah,
but he gets bypassed a little bit easier. So it's like a part. And I'm not saying this is bad because from a team dynamic, it makes a little bit of sense where Casemiro gets in. Maybe he slightly misses, but puts them off. and this is kind of how tackles work, where it's hard to see just with stats, right? Because you have players like Fred didn't used to win the ball a lot, but he did because he puts players off and then someone else comes in and cleans up. And that's what's happening a lot with Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo, as far as I can see, is that Mainoo's following up a lot of Casemiro's pressures and winning the ball.
But also,
so I think Ugarte will relieve some of that.
Yeah. Also, they're having to fight more duels now. If you're being more if you're being more aggressive in the press, you have to fight your duels more, and you're tackling more. So maybe that's why it's happening. But Ugarte will take off the load of Mainoo in that respect. So if you have, is he a Casemiro replacement? I don't know. But the point is, United had a number one target in mind throughout the whole summer. Fans can disagree, and us analysts can disagree, and other people can disagree, but this is their target from day one, and they've got him. The interesting thing now is how many minutes does that take off Casemiro? I personally think they still need another midfielder. They were very, very light in that department. Very, very light. Obviously, McTominay has now gone the other way now as well. So I guess we will see. We're gonna sit on the fence.
Yeah, we will. And so that's all very interesting, and I think Ugarte will help a lot with keeping this press up. Help add some more energy, especially if Mount's not playing. Then we need some more energy. We need to press a little more intelligently from the front. But there's a lot of improvements. Now, I want to ask you about two more things. Two more, maybe more negative aspects to say where I think United could use some improvement. First, how do I put this? Like you talked about their buildup going from defense to midfield to attack. One of the things I felt hurt us against Brighton especially, and I wish we were better at it against Fulham, is that when we do get it into the attack,
decision making is bad.
It's right, and it's a pattern that hasn't changed for a long time.
Yeah,
it's so rushed. Once we actually get it into the attack, it's always instant on goal. And what I notice in watching is we never attack with more than 3, because we get 3 and they rush up, and I mean there were moments I watched, Ahmad 1 against 5 because there's nobody else there, because it's so fast in getting forward. Like once we bypass that high line and get forward, you notice with some other teams, and it's funny because Arne Slot talked about this risk first reward, and also like if you can get in behind and you're on goal, go for it. But we also want to keep the ball a bit more when we get in attack. And if you watched against Fulham, it was better. I think the dynamics of Dalot on the left, once he gets into the final third, are still confusing because he doesn't have the left-footed overlapping ability, obviously, that Luke Shaw or a left-footed fullback would have. And so it's still a bit confusing there because they get jumbled on that side. But it showed up a lot more in the Brighton game. You'd see the attackers get forward, and it's like one of them against the whole Brighton defense, or it's 2 against 5, or it's 3 against 6. And we don't have the numbers in there. And instead of stopping, holding the ball up a little bit, letting the rest of the team push up, letting the fullbacks get involved, letting the midfield runners come up to where you can start making overloads, we just go. We just go and try to score. And I'm not saying we didn't create some good chances. We did when we really did get in behind, when Ahmad got actually through, like totally in behind. But I feel that we spent all game trying to get in behind. And there was a lot of moments when we weren't in behind, and instead of just slowing the game down and letting the back line push up. And I do think it affects the press, because if you attack so quickly and your back line is still deep, then if you lose the ball, you have a deep line instead of a high line, right? Whereas if you hold it and let Maguire and Lissandro get up into the halfway, which they did really well against Fulham, they had the ball a lot where everybody was in Fulham's half. Against Brighton, not so much. They were much deeper in possession in general because we were going quicker. And it was on purpose. It's definitely instructional. And my hope is that changes a bit, because our attack is still so feast or famine to me. It's like we'll make two big chances, and if something goes wrong, like goes off Xerxes' knee in an offside position because
Oh my
he was
God.
going for the ball from Bruno, but he didn't get to the ball because the ball went in front of him, and then he's in that, and then he's just unfortunately wrong place, wrong time, and it's an offside. Like that goes wrong, and suddenly you don't score and you don't win because
Yeah.
that's the only chance we made that whole half after Ahmad's goal. And I'm like, I want it's feast or famine. And it's kind of like the discussion of is two big chances better than 7 or 8 or 9 small chances around the box. The balance for me is still not right there. I want to see us attack with 7 players. I want to see
Yeah.
everybody getting forward and everybody getting into all of that.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I gotta say I'll disagree with you on this a little bit because I
Sure.
haven't seen the problem more being calmer in attack. I think that's been better. Honestly, I think that's been better. It's definitely a lot better than last season. We've seen a lot of players like the wingers when they overlap or the build-up when Mainu comes short. Instead of going in behind a lot, they'll just sort of calmly work it to the other side and wait for the
Right.
space. I think it's more a problem of being clinical. I think back to Bruno had 2 very clear-cut chances against
Well,
Fulham.
to be clear, against Fulham, I thought it was very good. I had
Mm.
almost no complaints about how we played against Fulham. Aside from, I still would like to see the fullbacks involved a little bit more in the
Yeah.
attack. I just would, but it was more against Brighton in particular that I bring it up because I felt like when we were chasing the game for most of the game, we weren't.
Mm.
I don't know how it is, but at some point, I'd like to see United get back to a position where when we need a goal, we're like surrounding their box. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
just
I know what
pushing
you
them
mean a little bit.
in, and not
But
run, and then we take 5 minutes. Yes,
formulated manner. I get what
because
you're saying.
going for it, like the problem is when we miss, because we're not suppressing their whole team. I feel like it takes us 3, 4, 5 minutes to get back into the attack, and we run out of time. We just run out of
Yeah.
time versus like sitting around their box, and it's like shot, it comes back off, you win the second ball, you're moving it around again, shot, win the second ball, and you don't have to wait minutes in between to actually get back into those attacking positions. Like I think there's just a long gap between our attacks when we get to the goal, like a big
Mm.
gap in time. And so
As
when we
as
really
in
need a
as in
goal, it's
sustaining attacks,
frustrating.
like
Yeah.
pinning teams back and then calmly
Yes.
sort of
Yes.
like, and then
Yes.
when an
When you
opposition comes
need
back,
to.
quickly winning the
Yeah.
ball. Yeah. I
I'm not
think
saying you can't go quick, but I think there has to be a balance, right? Where you go
mm,
quick when you can, but other times you do pin them and hem them in.
I think it might have something to do with whether this intensity is going to be kept up in each game. Because to me, in both games, the first half performances have been much better, and then the second half performances have definitely trailed off. Like 100%, they've trailed off. Um, Especially the second half against Brighton. But what I will say as well, maybe it's an attack that is still sync together.
Mm.
It's still learning how to press together, but it's also sort of learning how to still be functional when the substitutions come. Because Xerxes,
Yep.
he's slowly, my mount's gone off in both games, but we definitely have to work on sustaining the performances in the first half and in the second half. In terms of with and without the ball, in terms of defense and
Yeah.
attack, it's been worse in the second half. But I get what you're
Yeah.
saying. What I will say is on that, when the game did become a tennis match against Brighton in the second half, I was
Yep.
like, right, we've seen this movie before, guys, right?
Yes.
Bruno should have been like, bro, I'm in now, bro, I'm in. But instead, he was
Yes.
off. He was on the bench.
And
I
isn't that
didn't.
funny? Like the
That's
timing
one thing
was
I didn't.
really weird in that.
That's one
Yes,
thing I
because when
didn't
it
understand.
really
Like,
got
I was
chaotic,
like, I
then
was like,
Bruno was
dude,
gone. Yeah.
I was like, dude, if there's one player in the world that you want when it becomes a tennis match, I bet Bruno
Yeah.
was literally chomping. I bet he was fuming on the bench, but
Yeah. Well, when he's
um,
smiling while being substituted, you know that he's probably pretty unhappy.
yeah, yeah. And I love that about him, by the way. Like, it's
Yeah.
not, he's
Yeah.
clearly the player this team is surrounded
Yeah.
by. No
Yep.
anger, no chucking the boots away, no being furious. Garnacho got subbed a couple times last season, and he was furious. Interesting to see how that develops, by the way, because that's another thing. Ahmad has kind of Ahmad is playing in the first 11. I wouldn't be
Mm.
surprised to, and I love Rashford as much as he is. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point he tries Garnacho on Ahmad, because
Yeah, me
you
neither. Yeah,
got
I wouldn't
to,
be surprised.
because you've got to, because you can't. Rashford is the only player apart from Bruno in the last 5 seasons that has given us a player who has been elite. But
Yeah,
it's not good enough being elite for one season, being bad for another, being elite for
yeah,
one, bad for another. Especially now when there's forwards coming through and they're younger than you, and they might be
yeah.
smarter than you out without the ball.
Now this presents a little bit of an issue because United's assessment of Garnacho is as well that he's much better off the right too. And I think we've seen that because he is better off of the right than he is off of the left. He's more creative. He's more dynamic. When he moved to the right last year, um, it was around Christmas. He moved to the right, and they ended up playing Rashford, Højlund, and Garnacho on the right, and he took off. And it was like the next 2 months he was on good form, and he
Oh,
was
he was great.
scoring and assisting, and it was so much
Yeah,
better from him. And I think because it's sort of a funny thing, like you usually think, the typical way, right, of the left footer on the right and right footer on the left, and they cut in, and then the fullbacks going around them. But because our fullbacks don't particularly overlap that much, you get almost a bit more out of the wingers being on their natural footed side, right footer on the right, by getting to the line and doing the low crosses, because you're not getting that from the fullbacks as much. But so it's interesting. But the problem, of course, United have is they don't have a backup left winger. If that's the case, right? If Ahmad and Garnacho are your right wingers, and I think they are, they don't
yeah.
have a backup left winger to rotate with Rashford, which is still a bit of an issue
No.
because I think you'd
Is
want to have
Anthony right
one.
wing? Anthony's right wing.
Anthony, yeah,
No.
he is,
I guess
but he's
left
also not, they
footer.
don't want to have him play at all. Frankly, like if it was up to other people's choice, he
Nobody
wouldn't
does.
play. No,
Sorry,
so
I
no,
don't,
but
I
it's
don't
like
want to be mean, but we are where we are
you,
with him.
you have this problem because Jadon Sancho was the backup left winger in preseason for the most
Mm,
part, but he's leaving and he doesn't want to be here, and they don't really want him here, and it's not going to work out, right? And so then you get like some of these stories about like Raheem Sterling, and United
so,
are and have actually considered it. Why? Because we don't have a backup left winger. We don't have
mm,
anybody now. Raheem Sterling. On that note, the instant reaction of most people is very negative when if you mention Raheem Sterling, because of course I think you're thinking big wages, expense, older player. He wouldn't, just to be clear for the context of this conversation, if he joined United, on the low chance that that occurs, it would only occur on a much lower wages on a short-term deal. In that case, Raheem Sterling would be the best presser of any of our forwards by far,
yeah,
out of
yeah.
possession. He's a
He'd
really
be good at
intelligent presser. He's very good at it. He's very smart. He's been in the league a long time. I think I would see the benefit of an option like that, so that you could give Rashford rotation and not start him every game and get him back into form by not having playing all the time. Because I think the problem is if you go Garnacho and Ahmad, you still don't have backups now on the wings. You still have an issue, right, where you don't have the depth and quality on the wings moving forward. We're short like one winger, in my opinion. And then you're playing Garnacho probably out of position, out of his best position, because Rashford isn't playing well. And then what happens? Well, we saw last year. Then Garnacho doesn't play as well on the left and struggles again, and then you're back to square one. So I would
yeah,
like to see us have a backup left winger to so Rashford could be on the bench, until he gets
yeah.
back into form, because I
This,
think that would help.
I think this is where EFL, Europa League, FA Cup is going to come in handy as well, because
Yeah,
you got 6 games, whether you like it or not. 6 games on a Thursday. Schedule
yep,
gets pumped.
yep,
You need minutes in the legs. So this is the thing now. He's got the beauty of a lot of attacking depth. Like genuinely,
yep,
you've got Xerxes, Mount, Bruno, Garnacho, Diallo, Rashford. And they're competing for 4 spots there. So
yep,
I think we'll see some experiments on him trying a lot of things, which is why I think this is why we've seen a lot of subs against Fulham as well. Garnacho,
yep,
Xerxes, and McTominay all came on. Um,
yes,
and it changed the balance and this, that, the other. But you do make a good point in the fact that it might be better to just keep having as much depth as possible. And if it's a long season, it's a 60+ game season. If one thing doesn't work, bring another thing on. It's what Pep Guardiola is the best in the world at rotation. Almost go
Yeah.
look at this for City. Wingers play more than 25 games or start more than 25 games. It's rotation because you've got to keep players fresh, and you can't have anybody be tired. But also it creates a different dynamic when you maybe need a spark in a game. So maybe that's the way things are going, and we'll see with Sterling as well.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see it where Højlund could play off of the wing at some point in time when he comes back.
My God, I forgot about Højlund.
Yeah.
There you go. There's another player.
And that does help, but he's also, I think he'd be better off the right than the left also in that case.
I would just keep him up front. Just leave him as the center forward. Do you know what I'm saying? Leave him up front.
For sure.
Even if you have Xerxes, maybe you can try two front. Maybe,
and that might help where you don't need so many wingers, and Ahmad could play and kind of tuck into more central areas behind them with Bruno, stuff like that, where there's options. So hopefully we tinker a bit with the forwards, because I just think that specifically the dynamics of the attack are not there is probably our weakest point for now. That's my take on it from the takeaway. I've seen a lot of positives, and I feel like the dynamics.
Like the pressing is a big problem. I feel like the pressing is the biggest problem at the minute.
And to be fair, that's part of it, right? Is from the front. Like, I think that the back line has improved in following it up. I think the midfield, even with Casemiro, has improved in following the press up. I think the front three still feel disconnected in and out of possession. And that's the dynamic that I would like to see improve better. So I guess we'll hopefully see improvement in that. And I understand that that's kind of where you get a lot of variation. Like, coaches are different there. I think the front three kind of dynamics are less stringent than other areas of the pitch for a lot of coaches. I mean, you've had coaches say they don't even tell them what to do in the final third, right? They just let them do stuff, which I hope isn't the case, because for me that's not my ideal. But anyway, it's just interesting. And I would like to see improvement there. And I don't really care right now who gets in there. I would like to see Xerxes start, because I think he did bring that control that I was saying, a little bit more calmness, a little bit more patience, a little bit more possession, in just his way of being able to hold the ball. It gives you a different dynamic. I think I would like to see Garnacho and
he definitely suits this more calmer possession based, because he does this thing where, and I mentioned it in an article, he will come deep, form part of the build-up. Like we saw, this is a wild example, I'm just thinking of recent football I've seen. Morata in the Euros would always very come close to the build-up, drag a defender with him, and then the most important thing is he turn, then attack the box.
Goal.
That's exactly
which is
his
how he
goal against
scored.
Fulham.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
That. I mean, nobody does that for us in a long time. We have not had somebody do that since Cavani. I always mention the Cavani season, because Cavani is one of the best ever in his positioning as a striker and his movement. He's like, he was absolutely world-class throughout his career in terms of his movement and his energy, because he would do just that. He was so good at manipulating the defenders to where he wanted them to be, and then making the
he's a very underrated presser.
He is.
But it's all the elite forwards do. It's something all the elite forwards do, I think. Kane is very good at it.
Yep. So what would you say with the game against Liverpool? It's going to decide a lot of moods and feelings about United, isn't it? Because we've lost against Brighton, against the new manager at Brighton, even though they have a well-settled team, but we lost in sort of a frustrating manner as well. We have Liverpool and then at home, and then we have the international break. And a loss, I think, having two at the start of the season would be pretty bad. And then going into that break, it wouldn't feel the best. What do you think they need to do in order to fix that? In order to win, what changes do you think have to happen, or just keep doing what we're doing?
Like you said, it's a big important result, because that's gonna. Like, do you remember when the FA Cup win happened? I don't think I saw people happier. It was
Yeah.
because there was 2 weeks for it to sink in, and we had made a
Yep.
final, and it was all this in a very bad season. And in the end, it saved Ten Hag's job. So it's
Yes.
having large swaths of gaps between games. It's only the third game. It's
Hmm.
absolutely only the third game. I've
Yes.
seen positives. I've seen negatives. But if you want to fully commit with this, you've either got two choices. You either fully commit in the press, like you are doing, and you sort of refine the good parts and the bad parts of it, and you realize that it's Liverpool who are very good at playing out from pressure, and they've got good, very good forwards who are good dropping deep in the ball as well. But they have moved to a more patient, sort of calmer way of attacking as well. They're not going to attack you as quick as they would as last
Hmm.
season, but they do have
Yeah.
players. Again, they've got players like Trent. So, where do you want to press Trent Alexander-Arnold? Like, probably not. But if you are fully
But
committing in
maybe you
what you're
get
doing,
behind him, right?
yeah, I would say
Yeah.
keep doing what you're doing. I would say keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing, especially with Old Trafford as well. If you look at the games where United have press teams, it's normally at home. It's normally at home with the crowd roaring.
Yes.
So I think of Villa that last season. I think of Chelsea last season. Um, I think in some aspects Liverpool last season as well. The FA Cup
Yep.
semi-final. If you want
Yep.
to deal with the fact that there's problems in the press, all right, screw it. There's upsides though as well, and
Yep.
you gotta figure out the upsides and hope they come as well. So we're learning about what the team wants to do. I think the next 10 weeks will teach us more about what Ten Hag thinks of how he set the team up in the first few weeks, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
he's directed like the first few episodes, and now as we get onto the episodes later on in the season, we'll see how Ten Hag thinks of the reaction in terms of how we've played against other teams. I'm not sure if
Right.
that metaphor worked,
No,
but
I
try.
get it. I get it. I get it. I think that like it's too early to like try and win the game versus playing and continuing to bet in what we see as the best way to go forward for now. And then maybe there's minor adjustments, but it makes sense to keep pushing our basic plan forward in this game and keep going for
If
it
if
and
Mount's
see what we
out,
can do.
I personally wouldn't press Liverpool if Mount is out.
Which I
If
would
if if
suggest
Mount
he's
is
not going to
playing,
play. I mean, I would just suggest that that's probably not. He's probably not going to play.
if Mount is out and he doesn't play, then I personally wouldn't press Liverpool. But I feel like we're going to push along with it anyway and see how it
I think we
goes.
will too.
Um,
Would you
so
make any
this
other
is fun. Let's.
changes? Yeah, if Xerxes is in for Mount, let's say, would you make any other
Yeah.
changes to the team?
No, no.
No,
Keep the
same
team in
team.
sync. Keep the team settled. Let them build relationships on the pitch. Don't move too many chess pieces
Sure.
around just at the minute. Just as 22-23, I'll keep going back to it. It was a settled team. It was a settled
Yeah.
team.
Yep.
Rafael Varane, Shaw, Luke, um, Diego Dallo, Casemiro, Ericsson, Bruno, Rashford. I think Martial for like the beginning of the season, and then the right winger position was the only one where they were changing, and sometimes
Yeah.
it
Yep.
was Sancho, but keep the same team, let them develop some synergy in terms of out possession and with the ball. Also, I'm really liking Mazraoui at the minute. I just want to say
Yeah,
Mazraoui's a
me too.
terrific signing.
Yes, he is.
To
He's
get injured, so
a welcome surprise, isn't he?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Still got players to come. I
Yes,
think is he the only new signing that we've seen
that
like
started.
play?
Yeah, I mean, because Xerxes and Delict have both come on as substitutes,
Yeah, he's the only
and
signing
Lenny
that we've.
Yoros is injured, of course, so he's the only starter.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get Xerxes starting now, and then I'm sure we'll get Ugarte as soon as possible. Who's of course, even though he hasn't really played, he's an incredibly fit player. I think it's one part that's a real positive on him. Incredibly fit player. He's literally not missed a game with injury in like 5 years, similar to Bruno, and it's like
wow,
two in his entire career. None at his last three clubs did not miss a game with injury.
wow,
Very,
that's
very
interesting.
fit, very robust player. Sporting DNA. Something about these sporting players that come through there. They just
Yeah,
They're very, very they're iron players. So like Bruno, I think that's one of the positives United looked at. Between him and Bruno, they're never going to miss a game. You ask them to play
Mm.
every game, they're just going to keep playing and playing and playing, and that
Best
gives you
players
some
are always available.
stability. Yeah.
Bless me.
So I think he'll be yes, bless you. I think he'll be in there soon, and I think he'll be a pretty regular fixture. But hopefully, then we get to see some more new signings. Euro will be another month, 4 to 6 weeks. Interesting to see when he comes in because he's provides something very different to De Ligt and Maguire. Very different.
Yeah. We'll
In
see how many
his
games he
traits.
plays as well at the beginning, if he's straight in there
Yeah.
or
Yeah, I think they'll work him in
in.
for sure in those Europa and such, especially coming off the injury. But okay, anything else you wanted to say before we wrap this up now? And otherwise, we'll do it again regularly after. We'll do it
I
during the
think let's
international
do a
break for
weekly one,
sure.
yeah.
Yes.
It's very early in the season, some optimism, some negatives, but let's see how it's going. I'm certainly
Yes.
not upset as much as I thought I'd be, but I might be if we lose to Liverpool. So
Yeah, can dictate a lot of things.
unfortunately, yes.
Okay, well, let's end it there. Thank you all for watching. Appreciate it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Make sure to follow Dharnish Iqbal on Twitter and or X or whatever it is now, and he'll be posting the thread, and it'll be a good one. Make sure you follow that, and we will see you all later. Thanks for coming on.
Bye, guys.